Hey everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan and today we are continuing our How to Build a Big Block series. If you've missed the other videos, please go check out the past videos. I put them on a big playlist here on YouTube and they're all pretty darn important to building your big block. However, if you want to sort of piecemeal the information together, or maybe you just forgot how to do something, that's why I've broken these videos up so you can kind of find it a little bit easier. Today is kind of a simple job in theory, but a very time-consuming one. Today we're going to be putting the crankshaft back in our Gen 4 big block. There's really nothing more to it than to do it, so let's get into it. Alright, so just like we cleaned the engine, we now have to clean our main caps here, and we're going to do that with some carburetor spray and some time. So go ahead and remove these bolts and set this aside. Grab our main cap here. Now what's really important is to make sure that all absolutative that this surface here where the bearing will settle in is completely clean. You can't actually have like little bits of metal, any kind of oil, even finger oil, so it's kind of good to use gloves here. So we're going to go ahead and clean this off with some carburetor spray. Make sure that this is all nice and cleaned off. And we can grab some compressed air here. And really make sure that is nice and clean. We can even grab, use our thumb here and make sure that's really clean to make absolutely sure there's nothing in there. I mean, even little microscopic flecks of metal can totally ruin this build, because if you spin a bearing, you're gonna have a bad day. I'm gonna go ahead and set aside the first main clean cap here, and all the rest you do exactly the same. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So I came across this bolt that had a little bit of rust on it, so I'm hitting with some carburetor spray, and then off to the side of my workspace I'm going to use some WD-40 and some compressed air. So this brings me up to a point that I want to iterate that you want to make sure all the threads on all of your cap bolts are nice and clean like this one is. So on the fifth cap on the rear of the engine, this is where the rear main seal is going to be sit, so that has to be clean as well because that's where the rear main seal is going to seal and be glued into, so that needs to be nice and clean or you'll have an oil leak. So this is a Gen 4 big block, it's a little bit older design, so it has a 2-piece rear main seal. On the newer stuff, it has a 1-piece rear main seal and it just goes in. So again, on the rear main, or the rear cap, has a thrust bearing surface here, and this needs to be just as clean as the regular bearing surface and the rear main seal surface like we talked about earlier. And there we go. These are ready to go back into our engine, but now we need to put the crankshaft in. All right, so now we can take our trash bag off of our engine, and you can see why we did that. Maybe it's a little hard on camera, but in real life I can tell you there's like a little film of dust on top of it, so it's a good idea to have it in a nice trash bag like this. Alright, so I got some carburetor spray here and a paper towel. You want to use a paper towel because it doesn't leave anything behind, and if it does, chances are it's going to be big enough for you to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and spray my paper towel with carb spray away from the engine so it doesn't go down into it. And then I'm just going to go through the first bearing like this, make sure that's nice and clean. So you see how much gunk comes off of it? It's pretty noticeable. So after that, use our thumb here to really make sure this material is just metal, and wipe our thumb off here. And then on number 5 here, it's pretty important to clean that thrust bearing surface right here at the end of my fingertip, as well as the surface for the top of the 2-piece rear main seal. See how gross that is? Yeah, that can't be in your engine build. All right, so the next thing we can talk about is these flat surfaces here. This is where the caps actually physically secure to your engine, and you wanna make sure those are nice and clean as well. Just like that on number 1, and just do that for the rest. All right, with that out of the way, we can go ahead and give it one final spraying of air to make sure it gets rid of any kind of little loose fibers that might have been left behind. All right, we got our crankshaft bearings here using some King bearings. The part number is MB556SI010. I have left a link down below in the description to these exact bearings if you want to follow along. So, the thing with bearings is there's only one special set, and it's these. This goes on number 5. This is your thrust bearing set for the 5th main journal cap. So we can go ahead and set this aside. Now these 8 are kind of interchangeable, but these don't have holes in them, and these do. This side comes with holes. These are for the block. They match up with the oil holes in the block. These are for the caps. There is no holes, and if you mix these up, your engine's ruined. So it's good to pay attention at this juncture. Take them out of the packaging here. Just be careful not to bend them or gall them with a knife. Go ahead and set one aside. Now this is the block side because it has a hole in it. Keep that in mind. But I just want to arrange them in pairs so I know which ones go where. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put them like this. Toward me, block side, toward the caps, cap side. See, nice and flat, no hole, that's a cap. Now, those are nice and set up. We can move on to our 5th cap and block set here. So no hole goes on the cap. Oil hole goes on the block. And now we're nice and organized. All right, on our bearings here, they are pretty clean out of the packaging and all that, but why take the risk? We're gonna go ahead and hit them off to the side with some compressed air. Before we go any further, I wanna go ahead and go over that we're trying to be as clean as possible here using clean towels, clean paper towels, carburetor spray. Trying to do it in such a clean as manner as we can. Engine building is an art, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, including going all the way up to like a clean room. Like the Nissan GTR engine is built in like a microchip approved clean room, like a hospital. So we're just doing our best here. Always try to be as clean as possible. I do recommend using gloves, and I do recommend using carb spray and clean towels. All right, so I have our first bearing here, and we can see that there's a tang here in the block and one on the bearing material just there. And we want to make sure that lines up. We're gonna go ahead and slide the tang side in the bearing like that. Make sure it's nice and parallel, and we can push down on this side. Make sure that's nice and lined up like that. And there we go. And you can also judge it based off of this hole. If the holes aren't perfectly lined up for each other, if they're slightly off like this or like this, then you know it's not on correctly. But we can see here that this is perfectly fine. We can go ahead and push the middle of the bearing material down with our thumbs like this, just like that. So we're on number 5. This is the thrust bearing here, and it has its own tang as well that corresponds with a tang in the block. So you want to make sure that's nice and lined up. All right, with all of our block side bearings and the tangs correctly lined up with the holes nice and able to have oil flow through them, we can go ahead and move on. All right, before we go any further, I want to go ahead and talk about the gasket kit we're going to be using today, because we're going to be moving on to the 2-piece rear main sail for our Gen 4 big block. Now, this is a Fel-Pro KS2 618. I've left a link down below in the description to this whole thing. You will be using gasket from this kit periodically throughout this build, so it's a good idea to get it early. And our 2-piece rear main seal is inside of here, so let's go ahead and unbox that. This is what the bag of our 2-piece rear main seal, apparently it has part number P9004, and it looks like this. Comes in 2 pieces. Now I'm gonna carefully open this. All right, so here is what we're gonna be using as our bottom of our 2-piece rear main seal. And it doesn't matter which side goes in what, so this could go on the top or the bottom. We're gonna use this on the bottom today. And it's important which way it goes. So it actually goes in like this, and we know that because this surface here rides against the crank, and if you have it this way, oil can just go out the back. So this way, oil pressure builds and it actually fights against it and makes the seal even tighter, and that's what you want. All right, so I have some automotive grade RTV room temperature vulcanizing silicone rubber. I'm gonna apply some to my fingertip, just a little bit. All we want to do is skin this surface right here. So we'll go ahead and do that. Not a lot of RTV, you're just skinning that surface. And you want it as wet and as fresh as possible for the application. So keeping what I said in mind earlier, we can go ahead and mount our 2-piece rear main seal to the backside, which goes this way. Yes, like this. Go ahead and line those grooves up there. And we want to make sure that these are set in evenly. So we got to make sure that these are nice and pushed down in there. So we're gonna go ahead and push down on here and let it get a little dry, a little tacky, so it doesn't just kind of go boop back up. And now our crankshaft is ready to be installed. All right, so in this box is our remachined crankshaft. This is our stock cast crankshaft that we fetched out of our big block earlier, just sent the machine shop and remachined. I don't have a part number for you because this is the original crankshaft, but you can buy aftermarket ones if you want to, like a forged one or something special. Go ahead and take it out of the box. And we can go ahead and remove the plastic. So now we're going to grab some carburetor spray and clean off all the maning surfaces and then blow it dry with some compressed air. Make sure any kind of little pieces of metal or any kind of dust is out of our way. All right, now we've hit it with carburetor spray. We made sure we got plenty of it in the journals. We're gonna grab our compressed air and do the same thing. I've now flipped the crank over so I can get to the other journals on the other side. Now it's ready to be installed. We're gonna go ahead and grab some engine assembly lube or motor oil. You can use either or. We're gonna be using motor oil today. And what we're gonna be doing is applying a little bit to our fingers, applying it to this seal here, and all the riding surfaces of the bearings. And don't go to the top either. You really don't want oil to go in between those bearing surfaces. You just want it to be on the top of it so it gives the crankshaft a little bit of lubrication before you start the engine. And you don't even need to go to the top of each bearing. Just a little bit of oil on those riding surfaces is really going to make the difference in this build. So now we can grab our crankshaft and be careful, it is pretty heavy. So when you're dropping in a crankshaft, you want to make sure it is straight down into its home and don't spin it once it's in. And there we go. Is now the rear main seal, the block side, is going to be held in place with our crankshaft here. And also, once it's at this stage, don't start spinning it, because I can get oil behind the bearing, which helps it spin, which means you destroyed your engine. So leave it how it is for right now. All right, so we're going to take the 5th main cap here and remove the bolts. Flip it over. We're gonna make sure it's nice and clean, which we did earlier, but you can double check. Go ahead and place it on the table. We're gonna go ahead and grab our bearing here. I'm actually gonna flip it around because I like it when the tang faces me. And we can do that for the bearing material as well. It installs exactly the same way as the other ones did. So on this cap here, you wanna make sure that these surfaces are even, so they're nice and flat. You can feel it with your finger there. So you make sure it is even on both sides and not cockeyed. And you can use a really soft plastic hammer, or I just like using my thumbs. We can apply some silicone rubber to our fingertip again, and we're going to skin this surface here for our two-piece remain seal. And it's just like on the block side. And there we go, that's what it should look like. And now, while the silicone is still wet, we need to put in the top of our two-piece remain seal, making sure it's going in the correct way. So we'll set it this way, and we can look, and we can see that this is going to be the way we want it, because it will ride on that brim there. This lip right here of the seal needs to face inward towards the engine, and the cross-thatching kind of area towards the back. We can go ahead and install that. Just like that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is grab our silicone rubber again, and we need to put a little bit of dab here on the seal, and then a little line leading out toward the outside of the engine, not too terribly much. Actually, a little bit too much. There we go. Because oil can bypass that seal and just go right out the side, and you'll have a leak. So that's no good. So we want to do that for both sides, just like that. And then what we need to do is grab some more of our engine assembly lube or motor oil, and do what we did earlier on the riding surface, like this, and then on the thrust surface as well, the 4.5 thrust surface bearings. And you don't want to get engine assembly oil on the glue. Just want it to make a nice seal for you there, just like that. And we are ready to put this on the engine. All right, we're gonna take our 5th cap here, the one we've been working on. We're gonna install that by having it go straight down. Into its home like that. And then we can grab our bolts and replace those. We're not gonna torque them down just yet. We're just gonna go ahead and snug them a little bit. I'm not tightening to full spec. I just wanna make sure this isn't gonna go anywhere. Just, you know, like wrist tight. How about that? Maybe like 5 pounds if you absolutely need a torque spec. But you just want them a little snug. And of course, this is a 13/16. And you wanna make sure when you're tightening this to do it as evenly as you can. And we're gonna torque that to factory specification later on. So I have my number 4 cap here, and it is important which number you have. We're gonna do the 4th one here, and it needs to point the right direction. General Motors at this era put little arrows to tell you where it went. So it goes in just like that, and our bearing is nice and installed just like that. All right, and if for whatever reason your engine doesn't have arrows telling you which way the caps go on, the tang here and the tang on this side will match up. So the tang, there has to be an upper tang and a lower tang on the side it needs to be on, so you can't mix those up. It has to be tang on tang and facing the correct direction. Because unlike the 5th cap, 4321 can be put on backwards and it will totally ruin your engine. So it's really important that you get it right. Again, we're gonna snug these up as evenly as possible, and we're not doing factory spec just yet. And we can do that for the other 3 in descending order. All right, now here comes the exciting part with the torque wrench. We're gonna grab our 13/16 socket and we're gonna go to our first torque specification, which is 40 foot-pounds. No, that's not our final number. We're gonna do it in 3 stages. Our torque patterning is basically gonna be going from here to here, to here, to here, to here. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. There we go, and now we can do the exact same thing, but with an 80 foot-pounds. There we go, and now our third stage is 110 foot-pounds, and we do that for the 3rd time. And there we go. So this is a do or die moment. We need to have our crankshaft here turn, and if it doesn't turn, or if it's really, really hard, then it needs to go back to the machine shop. So it's really important that this turns fairly freely, like this one does. Oh yeah, so we're looking good here. So that's how you put your crankshaft back in, your Gen 4 big block. You have a Gen 5. It's pretty similar. I mean, every engine's pretty similar to this one as far as the crankshaft goes. Things might just be a little bit smaller and require a little bit different torque spec and stuff, but the bearing principle and the crankshaft going in there all pretty much works the same. But this video is going to be specific to a Gen 4 big block, which I'm building for my 1967 Camaro. And if you have any interest in either of those projects, please subscribe down below. I try to upload a big block build video every other week, and the interim weeks is more of how-tos on general, more modern day automotive vehicles. Thank you so very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you next time.